and welcome to the program. Charles Moscowitz here, and I'm joined by Russ Winter. Russ is the editor of Winter Watch, Speaking Truth to Power. He's got a great article up, Widespread Destruction of Police Cruisers Appears Orchestrated. Of course, we're talking about the recent communist purge and looting and burning primarily of black neighborhoods, the destruction of black businesses, the killing of black people. You know, I guess that black lives don't all that much matter when this happens. And it certainly hasn't, I haven't heard a peep from any of them with regard to the news yesterday, which is that there was, I think, something like 18 murders in Chicago, the highest number in 60 years. And I believe that St. Louis had a similar phenomena over the past couple of days. Not a peep from any of these people. Anyway, Russ, so let's talk a little bit about your research and what you got going.
Well, I think that we have a Discordian or Luminist arm, I would call it kind of a Trotskyite fifth column, that has really infiltrated into the blue states and cities. It's just shocking to see some of the behavior of some of these mayors and some of these city council members and some of these blue cities, including Minneapolis. And some of the mayors just act like fifth columnists, and I accuse them of being that. I'm just going to come right out and say it. I think people need to get it right out there and challenge these people and their behaviors, because they pretty much have just rolled over and let the looting and the rioting just devastate some of these cities. You know, so much so that the other day the mayor and a couple of the black aldermen down on the south side got into almost like a fisticuffs over a conference call that got leaked. Did you hear about that one?
No, what about it?
The aldermen were basically using F-words, F-bombs on the mayor. It says, you've left us totally unprotected. We're losing Walmart. We're losing our retail down here while you guard the loop rather ineffectively. So it also seems to me there's something going on within the police themselves where it just doesn't look right to me. It doesn't pass the smell test. And the article I wrote,
yep.
Go ahead. Yeah, the article I wrote on the widespread destruction of the police cars, I put up about 6 videos, because most people are visual. Most people don't take the time to really look at this stuff, but that's one thing I think I do pretty well on my side, is I get the videos up there so people can kind of ascertain what we're seeing. And I was really taken by a couple of them in particular. There was one of them in Philadelphia, which shows, and you can go to my site and you can see the video, and you can see it overhead of a helicopter, and it shows about 12 cop cars lined up in a nice, neat little row, and all of a sudden the police just disappear, and the guys from the hood, the boys from the hood, blacks, I would add racially, just show up and start destroying these vehicles. And I just kind of go, well, here's a city that's asking for bailouts, Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
New York is asking for bailouts, and they're just going to let these folks go in and destroy $1 million worth of police cruisers. This is the most astonishing thing I ever see. They show up with wire cutters, accelerants. So it has to be seen to believe. And then there was another one in Fairfax, which is, I guess, is near Beverly Hills. Same thing, a whole row of police cruisers just destroyed. And so I have to ask the question, who's commanding these? Who's in command? Charles Custer?
Mm. No, you would never get near a police cruiser.
Sorry. I was talking to Charles.
George Armstrong Custer. Yeah,
Right.
Exactly. I mean, normally you could never get anywhere near a police cruiser in any condition, let alone a whole line of them being completely destroyed. You know, it looks to me like a communist revolution, both on the street and in the boardroom. You know, it's the classic scissors effect. The lower blade of the scissors is the street. The upper blade of the scissors are people like George Soros and the money people and the, kind of the internationalists who want to destroy the Trump administration, and they're working in tandem. You have, an obvious example to me is the fact that under this medical lockdown, this medical martial law, They stopped churches from coming together and having services. But yet, because for the protests, everybody came out. Nobody paid any attention, or very few people, to masks or social distancing. They just came out and were allowed to assemble. And even in the case of Michigan, the governor herself, who wouldn't even allow you to buy garden seed, came out and protested right out in public with everyone else without any mask.
Yeah,
So,
and there's no rule of law for the so-called protesters, and we have to distinguish between protesters, which legitimate protest, and
of course,
what we're seeing. I call it just looting, wilding is one of the terms they use.
Yeah.
It's vandalism, wanton destruction. So fine if people want to go out and protest. We can talk about the George Floyd situation later, what I kind of think about. But
as President Trump says, there was
I think your assessment
some
is
good
right.
people out there.
I think your assessment is right, but I don't think I think it's more than just taking down Trump. I think they want to take the whole country down.
I agree.
I think they want to take it down and kind of create a Cheka, that they want to destroy the previous system of policing and create kind of a political arm.
It's like the communist revolutions of 1848. They're trying to loot the cities, burn the cities, as a way to create a new national revolution. I believe that.
Yep, absolutely. And so you have, I don't know, they've got some really extremely permissive prosecutors in a lot of these cities, like Philadelphia, who love to empty the prisons or the dungeons of predators. And that's right out of the, got a little bit of static there.
Oh, that's okay. There we go.
That's right out of French Revolution.
Sure.
Empty the prison.
Storming the Bastille. They're talking now about defunding police, getting rid of police. I mean, that seems to me to be, really? A lot of the people doing the talking live in gated cities. They're wealthy. They don't have to worry about living in a crime-ridden city. They're going to leave those cities, those neighborhoods, victim to criminals and thugs and revolutionaries who are going to just go in and destroy the place. It's out of their freaking minds.
Yeah, you see examples, for instance, even in these wealthier cities like Santa Monica, which is a pretty good place to live in a lot of ways. And the police chief, which is a woman, just told the police to stand down. Don't interfere with the looting.
Right.
And they're trying to get rid of her. I don't know if they're going to have any success, but these are just incredible stories when you just take them on a macro level, one after another, and look at it and see the pattern going on.
Well, I hope people remember this when they vote, because the same thing happened in Raleigh, North Carolina. The very liberal police chief happens to be black. She said, well, we're not stepping in. We're standing down. And right after making that statement, the downtown was completely looted. I hope that people, even the so-called brainless blue state people who just are driven by this irrational hatred of Trump, that they might wake up. They might suddenly become aware of this conspiracy to take down this government. And, let's hope they react to it. So far I don't see it, but maybe.
Well, here's an interesting quote by Alexander Solzhenitsyn I just spotted. It says that attacks on the police are an old communist tactic to eliminate law enforcement. The Bolsheviks successfully unleashed widespread attacks on the police in the run-up to the October Revolution. So they pretty much had dealt with the police even in the run-up. I think they buy them off. They get people infiltrated in key positions, and they can control the narrative. And so they take the police cruisers in and have them destroyed. Meanwhile, they order like 40 of their cops to go stand over the corner and do stupid things. Well, just go over there and stand and look, act like you're busy, and then we're just going to in-run you and destroy all your equipment. And so I don't see too many people really reacting to that, though.
No. Now, what is the
legitimate?
All right. Now, Russ, what is the research you have on George Floyd? My understanding so far, it's come out today in the mainstream Mockingbird media, that there's a lot of evidence that he and this guy, Chauvin, the cop who killed him, were enemies from way back. They knew each other. They both had worked together as bouncers in a club in South Minneapolis. that Chauvin did what was certainly racist. He hated black people, and that they had come to loggerheads many times. So this seems to indicate that this might have been personal. That this whole thing, it might have been that he was targeted as a person by this guy, this bad cop. What do you
Well,
have going on?
I'll tell you, I think it sounds a little fishy that a Latino nightclub, that also has La Raza in the same building, and the same building, the owner owned both a La Raza radio station, which is pretty left wing,
Yeah.
and has a Latino nightclub, and hires this Derek Chauvin for 17 years. That doesn't, it's no combinum. No, it doesn't combine. You know what
No,
I
I
mean?
mean
It
it's
doesn't make sense. So I
And
don't
by the way,
know.
La Raza is a very subversive group. They want to separate the whole southeastern part of the United States and either turn it to Mexico or create a new state called Aztlan. So I mean, we're talking about very communistic, very subversive.
Right. So my radar goes up on whether they're big enemies and all this kind of nonsense.
Who knows?
Yeah, who knows? But he seems that the other thing that was kind of interesting is the Daily Mail goes out and interviews the neighbor. I have that video up, and they didn't know that Chauvin was a cop. The next door neighbors.
I saw that. Yeah.
And they live, they're not living in an apartment complex or a big urban concentrated area. They're on a Minnesota cul-de-sac. And so I used to have a cop as a neighbor. I went over and got friendly with him.
Right.
I saw him come in all the time. I went and shook his hand, met him, had a beer with him one afternoon. And that's just not normal for the next door neighbor not to know that their neighbor is a cop. And they thought he was a realtor. So that's a very fishy story. Very sketchy.
Yeah. And also there's a lot of call right now for the police to have to wear webcams and all that stuff. Well, it so happens that in this case, the police were wearing webcams, and the city of Minneapolis is refusing to release the film.
Absolutely. That's the biggest thing of all. They've allowed people to go out and riot and get all excited and all worked up over this whole incident, and without really giving anybody the whole facts. And I'm getting tired of it. I'm getting tired of the CCTV not being available and a lot of these events, many of which I think are staged. I've said that to you before.
Yeah, I agree.
And unless you start showing me the CCTV cameras, what's going down, so that I can evaluate it, and quit protecting me like I'm some kind of a delicate flower. What's this all about? That doesn't show much maturity for a country to have to, and the authorities, which I think are basically criminals, to withhold. For instance, this Tao guy, he's the Vietnamese guy that was there, the little chubby guy.
Yep. Sure. Like what about him?
Too short to even be a cop, in my opinion. But he had a front row seat. The other three guys, I think of the three of them, two of them had apparently just started as policemen within days before this. I don't know. It's the whole thing, as you say. We need to get to the truth of this. Apparently he must have. You have to assume that he violently resisted arrest. This guy's 6'4", 235 pounds. He's higher than a kite. He took a drug cocktail of methamphetamines and speed and morphine. So for all we know, until proven otherwise, he was out there beating the crap out of these cops. We don't know. They got into an altercation, and so there has to be a reason why he's lying in the roadway.
And I'd like to just point out also that that doesn't mean he should have been killed by them. And I think that what we saw, whether or not it was doctored, it doesn't look good for, it does look like he was disarmed at that point and defenseless, and yet they were holding him down, and he was asking for help. And it was excessive, whether they were deliberately trying to kill him or not, I don't know, but it certainly doesn't look good. It's not what you want to see.
But the coroner ruled that it was not asphyxiation or anything like that. It ruled it was a heart attack, and then they did the autopsy. You saw the autopsy, didn't you?
No. Tell us. Speak of it.
Here. Important details here, my man.
Please illustrate for us.
The coroner has a positive findings of weed. He's been smoking some weed. Methamphetamine.
Oh, yeah, I heard. Yeah, I heard.
Methamphetamine is 19 milliliters. Fentanyl, 11. Those are killer doses. I mean, 2 or 3 will kill. Fentanyl will kill you.
Right.
And he apparently had real high tolerance built up. He had amphetamines, presumably positive, and morphine. He'd actually been injecting pretty good doses of morphine. So he'd had a big drug cocktail in him. He also had, the coroner revealed that he had coronary heart disease, hypertension heart disease, and high blood pressure. Several of his arteries were 75% blocked, and one was 90% blocked. So the guy was a heart attack waiting to happen. He's about 48 years old. Now the police don't know that, and the knee hold is okayed in the manual, the Minneapolis manual, in some cases. So I mean, it has to be used with discretion. It's not a hold that's outlawed in the United States at all. There's a lot of police departments that use it. Now, I'm not saying I endorse it personally, and
Right.
and maybe that's an issue. You don't put people in those kind of a holds. But the guy was in very poor health, and he probably was fighting with the police. So there's a lot of context to this thing. It's not a totally black and white story. And people need to just, drop the emotional response for a second, step back, and say, okay, all right, maybe the police handled the situation poorly, but that's not murder.
No, it sounds a little bit like the gentle giant Mike Brown from Ferguson. He was popped up on all kinds of drugs. He tried to grab the pistol from the cop. He was violent, and then the cop shot him, and which was regrettable. But it all of a sudden, I mean, it's strange that that these particular people would be so glorified. They were, they're not exactly posted people for good behavior. I mean, this isn't like some innocent black guy walking down the street here. They were, you know what I mean? I'm not saying that that it's a good thing they were killed. That troubles me. I don't want to see the police have that kind of power. As someone who believes in limited government and limited authority, and as a conservative, I'm against it. But you can make the case. I mean, they weren't exactly just bystanders. This isn't. I mean, I've heard of cases where some innocent black kid is shot as a result of a misunderstanding. This isn't that. I mean, these people were in the midst of a crime, and it looks to me like they were resisting arrest, and they did pose somewhat of a threat to the police. And if I, as a white guy, or somebody at least appears to be white, did the same thing, I'm sure I'd get the same response.
Well, my son had a little altercation with the police, and they were pretty rough on him. He's a white boy, yeah. So it's not.
Oh yeah, if you mess around, I mean, you do what they say. I mean, I do think that if you're black, you're a little bit more vulnerable to it because you are looked upon with more suspicion by police, mainly not necessarily out of a race thing, but because there is a higher crime rate among black people. If we deal with the root problem and take a look at why that is, and maybe stop some of these policies that have encouraged that, then that would dissipate over time. But as it stands today, there is a higher crime rate, particularly among black men. That's just a fact.
Well, in this particular case, they probably checked his rap sheet. So let me go over that with you. I mean, let's assume they checked his rap sheet. They have the ability to do that. A warrant, check for warrants, check for any kind of arrest records. And the police are getting pretty sophisticated at that. They have that information available. So in this case, you had 1998, 10 months in prison for armed robbery. So the guy's not afraid to use a firearm. 2002, 8 months in prison for cocaine. 2004, 10 months in prison for cocaine. 2005, 10 months in prison for cocaine. So he's a drug fiend. 2007, 5 years for armed robbery of a pregnant woman in her home with 5 other men. That was a horrific crime.
You're talking about George Floyd here, right?
Yes.
Oh my God, that's incredible.
He spent 5. Well, yeah, they're not really reporting that, are they?
No.
He spent,
Yes.
he was spent 5 years in prison. I don't know. Maybe he got out on good behavior because they're always rotating these people out. And then when he was killed, he was higher than a kite on meth and driving a car, on morphine. So, DWI in the United States is considered pretty serious anymore. So the guy's a bum. He's not a saint. I mean, I'm using a derogatory term, Saint Floyd, that they've created.
Well, they've created a deity. Yeah, they have.
Yeah.
Now, my friend E. Michael Jones, whom I've interviewed many times, he's blaming the Jews. Right? I mean, and the way he does that is that he says that the Israelis have been involved in advising police departments about how to deal with terrorists. And they had a conference in Chicago that he says that Minneapolis police attended a year or two ago, and he claims that they taught them about this thing where you put your knee on the neck, because that's what they do to Palestinians in Israel. So
well, I mean, I can show you photos out of Israel. I have a whole series of them of that very thing. They are using that.
Right. I've seen one photo of that, and it is problematic. But I mean, I think it should be noted that
I found a video of an American Jewish kid over there protesting. And boy, they really did it.
And look, I mean, I don't want to go too into it, but I just would point out that in Israel, you've got people showing up and murdering and blowing themselves up to kill as many Jewish people as possible. I mean,
it's a little different.
I mean, we're not talking about ordinary. Yeah, we're talking about terror.
It's a little different environment than the United States.
Exactly. We're talking about genuine terrorism, I would argue. A real, they're trying to deal with. And I think that when they came to the United States to advise police departments, it was for terrorism. It was after 9/11. It was when you had radicals, engaging in things like what they did in Santa Barbara or at that nightclub in Orlando and that kind of stuff. It wasn't for ordinary police work. That is assuming they even did advocate this. And I'm not saying they did. But
isn't it interesting that these guys out there are running amok and none of these methods are being employed against them? I mean, it's like a complete
against the actual terrorists.
Yeah, exactly. So
we've got some really far left-wing groups and people like E. Michael Jones, with due respect to him, going around and saying, "Oh, it's the Israelis, it's the Jews." I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, well, I'm not real in favor of the Israelis training American police, to be honest with you, because it is a different environment. Yeah, it's a totally different environment.
Right. I would tend to think they shouldn't do it either, but putting that aside, I mean, it's a little bit of a stretch to try to, to say, oh, this is the Israelification of American police departments. I don't know. Anyway, but going back to the subject at hand, it looks to me, I mean, this is by any estimation, this is being used as a way to trigger a race war or a race, conflict in the United States, so that they can defeat Trump, even though Trump had nothing to do with it, even though it was in a blue state with a blue mayor and a blue police department, and that doesn't even matter. And now between today and Election Day, we're never going to hear the end of it. We're going to hear about how, like black men are being. You think that blacks are being treated the way Jews were treated in Nazi Germany in the 1930s? It's ridiculous. It's
well. I don't know if you've noticed this theme called struggle sessions. Did you read that in my article about struggle sessions?
Talk about that. Talk about that.
Okay, this basically, here's what I say: the crime syndicate, because I do think it is a crime syndicate behind all this stuff. I truly do. I think it is a conspiracy, and so very ill intended. And I think that probably it is this Discordian group that wants to drag the country down, in a revolution. I think that's the goal. In some ways, I think that Trump is either a tool or even a part of it. Now, that might seem pretty strange to you, but some of his activities just don't pass my smell test either. But we'll just keep moving the ball up the field, okay? So let me just describe the struggle session. It's right out of Maoist communist China. They had public humiliation sessions, and they, we saw it initially being kind of implemented during these step and fetch it techniques such as social distancing, where they would humiliate you publicly or call the police, or what they do, call them Karens. Sure. Karen would call the police on you.
The Karen, yeah, I've seen that.
Not having
I know a few of those.
Yeah. So the social distancing, like you said, it seems to be conveniently forgotten now that the St. Floyd scam is being rolled out. And then the churches, they're being limited. And then here I have a picture of all these millennial white women. They're just totally brainwashed on this stuff, holding up their hands, just packed together. This I can't figure out. I can't figure out why the brainwashing is so.
Well, I mean, it's because day after day, month after month, there's nothing but this constant drumbeat against Trump, and I think that that once you trigger this stimulus, it's almost like a little computer chip in the back of their heads. It sends a message. There's also a drumbeat against whites, painting whites as demonizing them. There's a lot of that going on. Yes. I agree.
And making whites sort of responsible for all the ills of the racial situations. And not being willing to have a mature conversation. You can have mature conversations. I tried it today on my site, where I kind of wrote an article with kind of touting Garveyism, who's a black nationalist in the 30s and 40s. Had some great ideas.
Sure.
And it kind of brought out some of my people that kind of follow me, or calling me out on it. They're just kind of saying, no, these are inferior people. There's nothing you can do about it, Russ. And I don't believe that. I think it's a long-term program to turn the race around, just like it is to turn the white race around. Everybody's pretty diminished,
well, it's racial identity politics. I mean, if people start to think about people in the form of groups and races or whatever it is, and it's a classic maneuver. It's to generate hate on the part of the establishment for their own purposes. They don't care if they have to burn down black neighborhoods and kill black people, which is exactly what they're already starting to do. It's all in the interest of fanning these flames of division, creating this dialectic of conflict, so that they can step back into power. They can maintain their power. It's a British concept that goes back, the divide and conquer. That's how they controlled this international empire that stretched across the planet, because they would figure out who didn't like each other, and they'd pit them against each other, like two pit bulls in a ring.
Yeah, and they're right now they're using really nasty tactics, collective shame, guilt, and responsibility. And I would say for the drug overdose death of St. Floyd, and getting people to get out on their knees, and getting policemen to go.
Oh, it's obnoxious.
Yeah, it really is. It's just kind of like running amok, and everybody's kind of afraid to say anything about it. Apparently, you and I are here, but
yeah, I don't care. I mean, I'm not going to get on my knee to anybody. I mean, my religion tells me not to. As a Jew, I'm the only thing I've ever bowed down to is God, and I don't bow down to any person. I'm not going to bow down to any man or any woman. I'm just, and this, you see people there, on their flat on their face. I mean, it's un-American, actually.
They'll eat their own. They did it to. They had this extremist mayor Frey of Minneapolis, bootlicker he is. They did it to him. They shamed him. They had him show up.
Well, they're the first ones to go.
Go home, Jacob. Go home.
Yeah, and I like the way they looted CNN in Atlanta. They're the first ones that are going to get it. I mean, if you want to help black people, you reduce taxes, you reduce onerous regulations so people can get into business and make money and become self-sufficient. You engage in policies that help support the black family, as opposed to paying women to have children out of wedlock and to get rid of their men. You support, education that teaches young black students how to read properly, how to think properly, not these kind of behaviorist mills that are creating dyslexia in young people's minds. You bring back the black church is what you do. The black church used to be a moral force in this country that was like none other. I think it inspired the white church. It's been destroyed by leftists who go in and they buy black ministers with money under the table so they'll support abortion mills and during the Negro Project of Margaret Sanger in the 1930s, and other corruptions. They want to help black people. Let's take a look at policies that have been racist and that have hurt black people. They're all left-wing policies that have destroyed the black community.
Yeah,
I
well,
mean,
Garvey would have said, the black men themselves, quit looking at whitey for solutions. The white men themselves have to organize and whip these young people into shape. And it doesn't do any good for states like California or Philadelphia to change the law so that if you steal something under $500, it's no longer even a misdemeanor. It's just a summary complaint.
yeah, it's
And
opening up
California,
the
it's
front.
under 1,000, 1,000. So the excuse is, well, we don't want to crowd our jails or whatever. Well, really? No wonder you have all this wilding and it's just idiotic. It's just
They're giving a green light to criminals.
It has to be malice. It can't be incompetence. It has to be
They're giving
malice.
it's a green light to criminals. It's a green light to rapists. It's a green light to muggers of all sorts. It's just, it's anarchy. And again, it's all for political purpose. Because I think that if they think they're going to take power, then they'll crack down, after the fact. It's very situational.
Right. I mean, here's an interesting statistic that everybody that's out protesting against Whitey needs to also consider. This is FBI crime report, expanded homicide data. So you have whites killed by blacks, 9.83 per million members of the murderers race. So 9.85 out of a million whites killed by blacks. Blacks killed by white is just almost nothing, less than 1. Whites don't kill blacks. Whites killed by whites is 10.22. Now, blacks killed by blacks is 53.94. They're genociding their own people.
There's
There's some criminal element that's genociding their own people. It's like Chicago last weekend.
That's right. And nothing is said.
Nobody's talking about it.
That's right. Where is Black Lives Matter and George Soros and his other front groups? There's not a word said about it. Exactly. He couldn't have put it better. Anyhow. So, Russ, what else are you working on over there?
It's pretty hard not to find things now.
I really urge people to check out Winter Watch. It's you've got some great stuff there.
But, it's probably one of the things we might want to touch on is what Trump might do. And he did an interview with Playboy.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of got into his mind, and it kind of concerns me. I mean, I hope it doesn't come to the point where you have to send the 101st Airborne and the 82nd, like a complete flip-flop, the other extreme. You understand?
That's right. That's the reaction they want.
Yeah, but he does say, here's what he said, and it is a concern, and I'll just run it by you. Other than that, we'll just move the ball up the field. But I think you kind of know a little bit of what I think about Trump. We're not on the same page.
Right.
But he said in this interview, dang it, my page is stuck. Okay. He says, what were your impressions of the Soviet Union? I was very unimpressed. This is 1990, when the Soviet Union was starting to unravel. The system is a disaster. What you will see there soon is a revolution. The signs are there with the demonstrations and the picketing. Russia is out of control. The leadership knows it. That's my problem with Gorbachev, not a firm enough hand. You mean a firm hand as in China? He says, when students poured into Tiananmen Square, the Chinese government almost blew it. They were vicious. They were horrible, but they put it down with strength. That shows you the power of strength. Our country right now is perceived as weak, as being spit on by the rest of the world. Why is Gorbachev not firm enough? I predict he will be overthrown. Well, he was kind of right. He's cast out because he has shown extraordinary weakness. Suddenly, for the first time, there are coal miner strikes and brush fires everywhere, which all will ultimately lead to a violent revolution. Yet Gorbachev is getting credit for being a wonderful leader, and we should continue giving him credit because he's destroying the Soviet Union. But he's giving an inch is going to end up costing him and all of his friends what they most cherish, their jobs. And he pretty much said the same thing to the governor. He says, you have to dominate, he told the governor, warning that you're going to look like a bunch of jerks if the National Guard was not heavily deployed into protest areas. Now, I don't envy his position, but I kind of wonder what got us here. You know, where we have a guy that has some authoritarian ideas in his head of how to handle this kind of stuff, and a lot of people on the right are kind of chomping at the bits. You know, Tom Cotton says send the 101st Airborne in. Well, you do that, and if they use a helicopter gunship on a bunch of looters. All bets are off.
That's exactly what they want. That is the exact reaction. That's what it's actually how communism came to power in Russia. They wanted to goad the government into overreacting, and then they'd have them where they wanted them. They'd have them at their weakest point. I hope that Trump understands that. It is troubling what you're saying. As far as telling the states that they need to meet the threat, I actually agree with Trump on that. If they don't, then the radicals are going to take over the streets. They had to do it.
There's kind of a middle ground.
Yeah, I mean, you started your article by pointing out the planned nature of this, and I've even seen research that indicates that it was even more planned than that. I mean, they found all these caches of bricks and equipment stashed around cities. I think that actually the government did thwart possibly a much more dangerous situation, and that a government does have to maintain law and order, but. Hopefully, as a last resort, I worry that Trump might want to, be a little too trigger happy. I mean, that is a concern. I think that, an example of where he actually has maybe become more restrained was during this incident with Iran, when they shot down an American drone, and you had these hotheads and these warmongers like Bolton and others in the Situation Room telling Trump to start bombing. And they show we have 4 targets in Iran that you can take out. And Trump is really, how many Americans died? None. How many Iranians are going to die from this? About 300. So I said, well, F you, I'm not doing it.
All right.
So at least,
But it's kind of disturbing, though, that he's surrounded by these neocons. So
but I think he's gotten rid of them. He got rid of Bolton, fortunately. Guy's a complete snake. And, I don't know. He doesn't have the old neocons that Bush had. I don't think.
The solution to the disorder, and I gave one example, the city of New York, and I think Blasio is a fifth columnist. That's the problem.
Yeah.
They have these these armored water cannons. Those are non-lethal. These young kids can handle a shot of water. It's not good. It's not like grandma out there.
Right.
And so you roll one of those babies in, and you just clear the whole block. They're looting all these high-value stores, and where were the water cannons? Nowhere. The darn city is broke. Right. They've been spending money on some serious weaponry to deal with this very situation, and it's not deployed. So that just doesn't pass my smell test either. I'm sorry. It doesn't have to be total terror, helicopters, and it doesn't have to be the police standing down and running away. It could be somewhere in between.
That's right. That's right. No, I agree. All right, Russ. So what's coming up in your Winter Watch? What column are you working on now?
Right now, I'm kind of on empty.
There's always something around the corner.
I got kind of injured. I had a really serious injury a couple months ago, a fall. And
sorry to hear.
I got kind of a knee surgery, so I'm kind of recovering from that. And it's hard for me just to sit at the computer for hours on end. I'm kind of still working on my knee. So I'm working on the knee.
Okay, good. Well, that's a good project to work on. You don't want to have knee surgery if you can avoid it, right?
No, I had it.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay. See, I had a torn meniscus, and they were ready to have me have knee surgery. I hurt like hell. And I said, I want to try something else. I want to exercise and see if I can heal it myself. And they're like, well, that's not likely. but I did. I joined the local Y, and I did like treadmill, and I did these Nautilus exercises that just focused on the knee. I did this 4 or 5 times a week, and eventually I graduated to the elliptus, and now it's fine. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
95% cured.
Mine,
So,
my tendons were ruptured, so I had to have surgery. Anyway,
okay.
the doctors will be fascinated with my case. I can hear all your listeners now.
All right, well, be well. Take it easy and just, learn to, I mean, I've learned to compensate. You have to watch yourself.
Right.
Anyway, Russ, but listen, I want to thank you for joining me. Let my viewers and listeners know where they can pick up on Winter Watch.
Yeah, it's winterwatch.net. And we either run I have over 1,000 articles, so sometimes I'm doing reruns that seem timely. So something goes up every day. We have a little around the web column, a little news items I think that people might be missing. So we've had pretty good growth. It's been good support for our cause.
Go for it, and I hope to be in touch from time to time. Let's do some programming.
Okay, thanks, Charles. Good to hear from you.
All right, Russ, take care. Have a
Bye-bye.
good one. Bye-bye.